today's meditation, we are reading from Deuteronomy chapter 23, verses 15 to 25. You shall not give up to his master a slave who has escaped from his master to you. He shall dwell with you in your midst in the place that he shall choose within one of your towns. Wherever it suits him, you shall not wrong him. None of the daughters of Israel shall be a cult prostitute, and none of the sons of Israel shall be a cult prostitute. You shall not bring the fee of a prostitute or the wages of a dog into the house of the Lord your God in payment for any vow, for both of these are an abomination to the Lord your God. You shall not charge interest on loans to your brother, interest on money, interest on food, interest on anything that is lent for interest. You may charge a foreigner interest, but you may not charge your brother interest, that the Lord your God may bless you in all that you undertake in the land that you are entering to take possession of it. If you make a vow to the Lord your God, you shall not delay fulfilling it, for the Lord your God will surely require it of you, and you will be guilty of sin. But if you refrain from vowing, you will not be guilty of sin. You shall be careful to do what has passed your lips. For you have voluntarily vowed to the Lord your God what you have promised with your mouth. If you go into your neighbor's vineyard, you may eat your fill of grapes, as many as you wish, but you shall not put any in your bag. If you go into your neighbor's standing grain, you may pluck the ears with your hand, but you shall not put a sickle to your neighbor's standing grain. Israel was called to be a light unto the Gentiles. They were to reflect the light of God in all their interactions and conduct. In this chapter, God emphasizes the sanctity of human body, forbidding anyone who mutilates himself to enter into the assembly of the Lord. The Lord takes notice of how others treat his people. He singles out the Ammonites and the Moabites because while Israel was on their way to the promised land, these nations conspired against them. They hired Balaam to curse the people of God. Same time, the Lord points out that it is not against humans that we have to fight, but against the rulers and against the authorities, against the cosmic powers of this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. There is no way a believer can have fellowship with them. Paul says in 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 14, do not be unequally yoked with unbelievers. For what partnership has righteousness with lawlessness? Or what fellowship has light with darkness? What accord has Christ with Belial? Or what portion does a believer share with an unbeliever? What agreement has the temple of God with idols? For we are the temple of the living God. Cleanliness is next to godliness, said the devout saints of old. Without going that far, it is obvious that inner godliness is reflected in outward hygiene and cleanliness. The Israelites were to keep their camp clean of all physical defilements, because the Lord your God walks in the midst of your camp to deliver you and to give your enemies before you. Therefore your camp must be holy, so that he may not see anything indecent among you and turn away from you. Verse 14. Even more obvious in the Lord's requirement of holiness, wherever he chooses to make his dwelling place. We are the temple of the living God, of the Holy Spirit, and we therefore need to turn away from all that defiles mind, body, or spirit. We need to pursue peace with all men and holiness, without which no one will see the Lord. The fate of a runaway slave, if caught and returned to his master, could be death or cruel punishment. But God clearly forbids his people to hand over runaways to their earlier masters. This is a reflection of God's impeccable sense of justice. If a slave is treated well, he does not need to escape. And if he is cruelly treated and runs away, It is not treated as his fault, but a natural consequence that the master has to live with. It sheds light on God's diligent and watchful care over those who were once sinners but have sought refuge from the slavery of sin by turning to him. He says, anyone who comes to me, I will certainly not cast out. The poor have a strong refuge from their enemy in him. We who have fled to him for refuge have a strong hope, for nothing can separate us from his love. God also underlines his holiness and goodness by forbidding anyone to serve him with the wages of prostitution. Sacred prostitution is still prostitution. Giving their children to the gods to be cult prostitutes was a Canaanite practice and prevalent among many ancient societies, but strictly prohibited by God. Despite this, in the reigns of Asa and Josiah, we see the expulsion of male prostitutes from Israel. This indicates that they were tolerated in the land for some time prior to their expulsion. Today, when immorality is justified in many parts of the Christian world, it is important to cling to the knowledge that God is a holy God and calls his people to leave and separate themselves from all that is unholy. He does not need the filthy lucre of immoral practices to keep up his kingdom, but forbids such people to enter his presence. Chastity and modesty are virtues that become God's people. God also forbids the charging of interest while lending to one's own people. In a world of profit-making, where the motto is, let your money work for you, God shows that his people are characterized by their desire for the welfare of others. In Proverbs 19:17, whoever is generous to the poor lends to the Lord, and he will repay him for his deed. Generous giving is an act of faith as well as an offering of thankfulness, and also an act that keeps arousing praise and thankfulness to God among the recipients. It blesses those who give and those who receive. God takes the vows made to him seriously. A vow is a promise to dedicate a specific offering in the future, motivated by gratitude for God's grace in the life of the offerer, or in order to beseech God's help in a time of crisis. Notably, one cannot vow a resource that is already the Lord's. Therefore, the tithes that already belong to the Lord would not be dedicated to the Lord as a vow either. Real giving is voluntary and not by compulsion or obligation. The tithe is the Lord's and there is no voluntary element involved in its payment. But a vow or a promise comes from a cheerful heart towards God. Making and keeping a vow to God is pleasing to him. Psalms 50, we speak about how much God cares about a grateful heart. In verse 14 and 15, we read, offer to God a sacrifice of thanksgiving, and perform your vows to the Most High, and call upon me in the day of trouble. I will deliver you, and you shall glorify me. Yet God reflects his utter truthfulness and faithfulness by emphasizing that every vow must be kept. We who are created in his image must mirror his truth in our words, for words are a tool graciously given to us to reveal and not to hide or confuse the thoughts of our heart. Truthfulness is fundamental to God's nature and therefore inseparable from holiness. God encourages his people to regard their neighbors, to pluck and eat from their fields as they pass through. It is again an affirmation that God is the owner of this world and we are only tenants. He wants us to show kindness to each other because he is kind. All these laws reflect the fact that God is holy. That is, people reflect that goodness in their lives so that they may show who God really is and expose the lies of the devil. Jesus said in his Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 5:19, therefore, whoever relaxes one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does them and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. Let our lives arouse trust and love towards God by our faithful and cheerful consistency with his nature. God bless.